Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I am Mitch Maley, and welcome to another edition of the Punk Rock Politics Podcast. I am joined by actor and director Brendan Ragan.
What's up?
Fresh off the preview performances of your brand new work.
Yes, thank you. That's why I had to dip out last week. We were working hard on a new show, and it's ready to kick off tomorrow night. Thank goodness.
And we can't wait. And I'm also joined by comic and idiot savant, Alex Boyce. Thank you for coming back, Adam.
You're welcome.
Oh, Alex, I'm sorry. Where did I get that from? Huh?
Adam.
I think I was just I'm looking over there, and I'm looking for Elsie's feminine energy, and I wasn't prepared to get even more of it off of you. All of a sudden, it threw me a little bit. It jacked my testosterone way up.
By the way, for those listening, these two guys are good friends. I don't know why he just called him This is not like a guy who just popped into the podcast for the first time.
He's showing a lot of cleavage today. It had my head off. All right, let's jump right into it. We've got a lot going on. Let's start with Tom Perez, head of the DNC.
Former head of
the DNC, I'm sorry. Who said, we really got to look at the idea of Iowa and New Hampshire. And I believe, if I'm not going to make two mistakes in the first 2 minutes here, isn't that your home state, Alex?
That is my home state, yeah. I am from New Hampshire.
And he says that they should not have as much influence because they don't have the diversity to represent the party and shouldn't have so much weight in the presidential nomination process. My question is, should anybody have more weight than anyone else in the nomination process?
Well, I certainly don't think New Hampshire should. Having spent the first 18 years of my life there, it's the white middle-class alcoholics are not going to be the representative vote. And that New Hampshire is very not diverse. It's
functional alcoholics, let's be fair.
Oh, incredibly functional. Yeah, they get a lot done. But yeah, New Hampshire is definitely not representative of the country as a whole at all.
The funny thing is he's absolutely right. Iowa and New Hampshire should not have more sway than any other states, particularly because they're just not very good demographics for Democrats. And yet, here we are with Joe Biden as president, who won the nomination after getting, fifth place in Iowa and fourth place in New Hampshire?
And being saved by South Carolina.
Of course he was.
But, the diversity state, right?
But if the argument is that those states have outsized impacts, well, it didn't matter with Joe Biden because as long as you have a primary process where you go one state at a time for several weeks, you will always give the party more power to control who they want the nominee to be than the actual voters themselves.
Absolutely. So that gets into the real issue, which is how incredibly nonsensical it is to have, what we call a rolling primary. Imagine if we elected presidents like that.
Jesus.
Like we're all freaked out because we might not know the winner in a day or two when that happens, but yet we have this other part of the process which is arguably more important because that's what gets us our Coke versus Pepsi candidates. But that one takes months and months and months and months, and historically the vast majority of states don't really get to participate. I've lived in 4 different states during presidential primaries, and I've never participated in one
where your vote mattered.
Where my vote mattered.
Yeah. I remember by the time 2020 rolled around in Florida, our choices were down to 2.
Yeah. And it was pretty much done.
And it was pretty much over. Joe Biden had won, but the only 2 people still even in the race were Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. And oh, by the way, there were 10 other candidates still on the ballot. Here's another ridiculous thing about having the primary, a rolling primary, is that by the time some states get to vote, several people who had to be on the ballot are not even running anymore and still racking up votes.
Right.
How absurd is that?
But it does put us in the unique category of having the same voting system as Belarus and Lebanon. So there's that.
All right.
Yes. Exporting democracy when we can't even get it right ourselves. So the big part there is what that does. I mean, it's a blatant effort by the party to be able to control the outcome and make sure something like a Bernie Sanders candidacy does not happen. And they've been able to successfully do that twice in a row where, listen, no matter how you feel about Bernie as a candidate, the reality is he was hamstrung, kneecapped, however you want to say it, by the DNC in 2 elections in which they made every effort possible to make sure they did not get his nomination. Or he did not get their nomination. And that's what this is really about. And it's amplified by the fact that the Republicans lost the nomination with that same system. They were unsuccessful, the RNC, in an equal effort to try to keep Donald Trump from getting the nomination in 2016. So that, make no mistake about that, in which, I'm sure that was a lesson for Democrats saying, look, Bernie almost did it. That guy did do it. That's the last thing that we need here.
Mm-hmm. Right. And you're running by coalition, really, when you have a rolling primary like this, because then you have a group of candidates who can make up a large percent, or can take up a large percentage of the electorate, like, say, a Klobuchar and a Buttigieg and a Biden. And when they're all ready to pull the trigger, they can all just point their supporters towards one candidate and put that candidate out as the front runner in any race. You can't do that if you had a primary on one day. If you had one single primary, all 50 states plus the territories, all on one day picking their candidates, you couldn't have this coalition. You'd have to run a real election, and you'd have to let the real winner become your candidate, which of course the DNC does not want in any way. And I also have to say, Bernie supporters are probably going to hate this because Bernie does really well at caucuses because he has young supporters who can sit around at a caucus for 8 to 12 hours or however long it takes. But caucuses are bullshit. And we have to get rid of caucus. Listen, I don't know that we're going to change to a single day primary anytime soon. The DNC is committed to doing some reforms to increase the voter say.
Well, even that, though, because somebody brought up, well, what about Arizona? That's got a lot of diversity. Nope, not Arizona. Bernie won Arizona. Get it out of there. South Carolina's good. We like South Carolina.
But also, Nevada is trying to jump to the front of the line, and they're trying to introduce legislation that Nevada would be the first state, which, of course, Bernie also won handily. And Joe Biden would have to sign off on that, essentially. He'd have to let Jamie Harrison know whether or not he wants that. Do we want Nevada to be the first state? It certainly shouldn't be Iowa.
And here comes a question with the reason South Carolina, in my opinion, is so easy for them to control is because of the African-American vote. And let me qualify that very closely. What I mean by that, I completely respect the idea of when African-American voters say, we don't have the luxury of making the imperfect the enemy of the good. Right. We are not as worried about all of the progressive issues that we need more than white people do, that we would benefit more than white people do. We are not as worried about them as you because we need to get this guy who incites the people in white hoods out into the streets, out of office. We need Trump to be gone. And as a result, I feel like that voting bloc is more ripe for manipulation by the DNC with the message of, got to get the guy who can win. And that message is always so corrupted because, again, we've talked about this before, every bit of polling and other data suggests, well, the progressive guy's the guy that can win, the guy that has the issues that have 70 to 80% plurality among voters across the spectrum, not just in the party, the $15 minimum wage, the Medicare for all, those sort of things. They can win. They're more likely to win.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that they would have picked up the fact that because Bernie Sanders was so popular and he had a message that involved policy. It wasn't just this sort of anti-politics of, oh, this person's bad, therefore I have to get in. You would think that would have resonated more, but again, this two-party duopoly doesn't want anything to do with that. They don't want anything to do with putting out policy that will help the people, unless it's rhetorical, unless it's just a way to gin up votes.
Yes, and that's what we have with, in my opinion, that's where you end up with the social justice issues where, hey, let's just put a bunch of stuff that are, very valid and in most cases very, very, progressive ideals, but at the same time, they cost nothing. And they're not going to offend the donor class. In fact, they're going to give a bumper sticker to those people so that they can mask their support for all these things that cause broad financial inequity, that cause, complete wealth stratification. But hey, we could feel good about it because I'm driving a Tesla and recycling my trash. And I think Black Lives Matter. I got a sign right in my lawn, in fact.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny.
In my lawn in New Hampshire where
well,
black people see it, right?
It's funny. I mentioned this before, but I spent a month up in Lexington, Massachusetts last August, house sitting for my cousin, and it's a very, very wealthy area. Huge, like 5-story houses everywhere. And I had never seen more Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ positive signs in the front of people's lawns than I had up there. And to me, that represents just the easiest way to signal that you're on the right side.
It's a lifestyle brand.
It's very much a lifestyle brand, and it's as long as it doesn't affect your portfolio, as long as it doesn't affect your income, then it's like, okay, sure, I'll make the statement.
In fact, I like the way my Nike stock is looking after they did this Colin Kaepernick thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take money from GeoCorp and all these prison companies. I'll have stock in them, but Black Lives Matter. It's ridiculous. It just erases any sort of class consciousness.
And that's why we really should not be surprised at all when people of color say we can't trust white allies. We can't, because on the surface, you'll share a meme, you'll put a sign in your yard, but then you are not fighting against any of the systems that are actually holding down our communities.
Now, the progressive pushback with that, though, is join us in voting for the people who will.
Right.
So that's the thing that I would like to see. I would like to see the African-American vote move away from neoliberal candidates under the guise of
can you blame them, though? Can you blame the stance that you just
that's what I'm saying. That's the really hard, that's the double-edged sword of that is you make that case, even though I don't think the case is valid. I think they're being misled to believe that that person had, by massive, assistance from the mainstream corporate liberal media. I'm one of the few people that will say all day long, yes, there's a bias in the media. There's a bias at the Washington Post. There's a bias at the New York Times. There's a bias at all CNN, MSNBC, but it is absolutely not towards progressive or socialist. It's none of that. It is toward the neoliberal Clinton-esque wing of the party, that exact type of, New Hampshire voter you're talking about. That's who they pitch to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're all about neoliberalism, free flow of global capital. It's not about supporting a welfare state, which is a dirty word, but it's not about creating social programs that would help to get historically marginalized populations out of poverty and give them opportunities. I've said this for years, but it's like Aristotle wrote about this in politics. James Madison talked about this, writing the Declaration of Independence. There's a fundamental tension between democracy and capitalism, because if you allow for the free accumulation of unlimited amounts of resources and assets, that's going to create a political power outside of the traditional system of voting and politics, and that's a tension. And I think that the things that we're talking about are offshoots of that tension, are symptoms of that tension between capitalism, the accumulation of wealth and resources, and democracy. And this is something that James Madison pointed out, something that Aristotle pointed out. You can have one or the other. You need to have things to offset it. If you have capitalism, you have to have a welfare state. It's the only way to do it. And people at the top want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want to have one without the other. And we're seeing the symptoms of it now. We have for 40 years.
Yeah, without question. You see that, and I think that tension, a lot of it has to do with fear that if the class system breaks down, it's not people will say, well, what's wrong with a liberal who says we shouldn't spend money on these programs? It's not about the program itself. It's not about the justice itself. It's about the threat to the status quo. And it's human nature that if you're I can't tell you how many, liberal Democrat friends I have that are in that professional class that will argue against something like scrapping the cap on Social Security. Where the tax stops at $119,000 or whatever, and they stop collecting it. So if you make $250 by May, they're not taking it out of your check anymore on your payroll taxes. And when you say, hey, we can, by the way that pay-go and different things that cause us, and the so-called Social Security reforms that were issued in the 80s that are really just bookkeeping problems that Medicare doesn't have, this, same trust fund requirements. But all that aside, if you're going to play by the current self-imposed rules and inhibitions that Congress has put on Social Security, you can still solve that problem by just scrapping the cap. That takes it out like 40 years where it's fine. But you'll still have those people say, well, maybe at $250. You know what I mean? Like it's human nature to say, if I'm doing well in the status quo, I'm probably going to defend the status quo because I'm going to see the good parts and I'm going to be able to explain away the bad parts. And that's why it's so important to have democracy, because if it is just the accumulation of power, the person with the power and resources is always going to feel like, you know, here's some good parts about the way things worked out, and here's what we're worried about if we change it. And you get to this tipping point where I think we're long past, where what you said, if you don't have those controls in place, like a progressive tax policy where you're taxing a certain degree of wealth from accumulating out of existence, where it goes up to 90% at a certain point, or you don't have those fiercely imposed limits on financial contributions to the political process and the separation of the corporatocracy and democracy. If you don't have those things in place, it will naturally then exponentially increase, and that's where it seems like we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So anyway, yeah, rolling primaries are bad.
Yes. National primary, all in one day. We vote, winner take all, and you get to represent us in the presidency. And that would make the donor class less important, which is why they're not going to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on. Second, Manatee County remains in the national spotlight again. And as usual, it is not for something wonderful that we did. Vaccinegate, and that is Manatee County Commission Chairperson Vanessa Baugh got caught not only taking a pop-up vaccine site, which Governor Ron DeSantis blessed us with, his vaccine. They were our vaccine doses that he brought here separate from what's doled out to the counties, and wanted to do a nice little pop-up in one of his developer buddies' neighborhoods. The developer buddy was smart enough to say, well, I might make some people mad if I pick one over the other, so I'm just going to bring in the county commissioner for our district and let them handle it. That was Mrs. Baugh, who handled it by choosing only 2 zip codes of the many in the county. They were 2 of the 3 richest in the county by median income, and they were also 2 of the whitest, and they were also 2 with the very lowest cases of COVID. And they said, just draw them exclusively from here. I know that we voted as a board to have a random lottery that gives everybody over 65 in this phase that are eligible to get it an even chance, but let's instead just draw it from that same pool, but restrict it to these 2 zip codes in my district. And if that wasn't enough, let's have a little side list of people that, and listen, 3,000
VIP list.
3,000 doses, and those zip codes only had 7,200 eligible people. So your odds were really good right off the bat, right? Almost 1 in 2 odds to get it. But 5 people didn't have to do it. In fact, 2 of them weren't even from that zip code. One of them was the developer. One of them was the developer's dad. Another one was Mrs. Baugh herself. Put me to the front of the line. So during a pandemic, she says, give me one of those doses, and I don't even have to have the juiced up odds that I'm giving the people that are in this, by the way, heavily Republican zip codes as well. I mean, it had everything going against it. And so it makes the national news. It's everything from the Daily Show to the Ingram Report to CBS News and everything in between, and CNN. And then we have a big meeting on Tuesday, the first voting meeting. And the expectation is, well, somebody, even though that there 6 members of the board are Republican and 1 is a Democrat, somebody is going to, at least, because the only process for Miss Baugh to leave is that she could resign out of shame for her horrid acts.
Which she should.
Yeah, but she's made it very clear that she not only isn't going to do that, but would do the same thing if asked again. The next recourse is the governor is the only one who can remove her from office. Well, that's not going to happen.
No, because she was acting at the governor's orders, as she has said.
Well, but she was also clear to say he didn't tell her to do it the way she did it.
True.
Right? He just, in fact...
But she was doing what he wanted her to do.
She said that, but then she's also carefully said, well, he didn't tell me to just pick 2 zip codes, and he didn't tell me to put a list on. He didn't tell me. So he did cause her a lot of embarrassment. I wondered whether that would be enough, but he would have to admit that a Republican did something wrong. A Trump-supporting Republican did something wrong. It gets into all these things that makes people's head want to explode, so it was not going to happen. And there was the thinking that, well, the only thing they could really do then is they could vote not to make her the chairperson anymore. And that could just be symbolic, but at least we could say, oh, we didn't leave it go totally unaddressed. And that vote failed 4-3.
So the slap on the wrist did not even slap.
Yes. And then there was big news that, there's a criminal investigation
Yep.
by the Republican Sheriff's Office
You're going to throw some cold water on that, aren't you?
that will be referred to the Republican State Attorney.
So you're saying it's not going to go anywhere.
I don't see it going anywhere. And there's an ethics complaint, which goes to the Florida Ethics Commission, which is overseen by the governor and is, as my pappy used to say, as useless as tits on a bowl. So nothing's going to happen in Vaccinegate. And DeSantis has not weighed in on it, but that may have been because he was busy this week. I don't know if you guys heard this one, making sure that flags were flying at half-mast in respect of who he called our national anchorman, Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah, never mind the fact that the flags were already supposed to be at half-mast for the 500,000 people that died of COVID. But sure, let's honor Rush.
Well, I don't think people were giving DeSantis enough credit. I thought it was just a really clever joke, flying him at half-mast as a nod to Limbaugh's 2006 customs bust when he got caught flying back from Costa Rica with a whole big giant box of Viagra that didn't belong to him. And I thought it was like a clever joke where he's like half-mast.
I don't think DeSantis is quite that clever.
No?
No.
Well, anyway, I thought it was a good joke. And by the way, I didn't know at that point that people go to Costa. Apparently, that is like prostitution paradise.
Yeah.
And
a lot
people
of
go on
sex tourism.
prostitution. Sex tourism.
Yeah,
Vacations.
absolutely. Yeah, what a disgusting human being. But Rush Limbaugh was
Misogynist pig?
Yeah,
An asshat?
A horrible monster?
a absolute terrible person, but a great entertainer. He was I thought about him when Trump made that comment when I think it was when he was running, when he like held up the Bible in front of a crowd of people and he's like, "You people love this thing, don't you?" It's like, to me, that's what Rush Limbaugh was. He's like, "Yeah, you guys love it when I say all this crazy stuff about immigrants and black people and women," and it's like, I don't know how much of it he believed, but he was a brilliant entertainer.
Well, there's an interview clip
entertainer
that surfaced on YouTube last week of him saying that he does it all for the money.
Oh, absolutely. I don't doubt that at all. The money and the Vicodin.
And the Viagra, apparently.
Yeah, and the Viagra. Yeah, he was just, and it's funny when you look at the tippity top in terms of like people that we perceive to be on the left, people we perceive to be on the right. You go to the tippity top, they're all on Epstein's plane. I mean, they're all just disgusting sex perverts who have too much money, who will have sex with children, and all this disgusting behavior when you go to the tippity top. I mean, they're not that different.
Conservative family values.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
All right, and that is going to take us into our favorite segment, Brendan's Bad Take of the Week.
Oh, I've missed this segment so much. Going a week without it, myself, hurts me. So I am happy to be back and giving the bad take of the week to our friend, our favorite senator from Maine, Susan Collins. This is in regards to Neera Tanden's confirmation hearing. As we know, Joe Biden has nominated Neera Tanden to run the Office of Management and Budget and needs to be confirmed by the Senate, and that's looking like it's in peril, thanks in part to Susan Collins, who will not be voting for her. Here was her statement on why she will not be voting for Neera Tanden. Neera Tanden has neither the experience nor the temperament to lead this critical agency. Her past actions have demonstrated exactly the kind of animosity that President Biden has pledged to transcend. In addition, Ms. Tanden's decision to delete more than 1,000 tweets in the days before her nomination was announced raises concerns about her commitment to transparency. Should Congress need to review documents or actions taken by OMB, we must have confidence that the director will be forthcoming. The OMB needs steady, experienced, responsive leadership. I will vote against confirming Ms. Tanden. This is stupid on so many levels. It actually makes me angry. It makes my skin hot because, number one, Neera Tanden is absolutely qualified to run the OMB by experience standards. I don't want to talk about policy or whether or not you agree with her, but she runs the Center for American Progress. She's been on like 8 presidential campaigns. She was the top senior advisor to Kathy Sebelius for Health and Human Services during the Obama years, and she was the chief architect for the Affordable Care Act, which has been one of the most popular pieces of legislation in the last 20 years. She's a policy wonk. She knows what she's doing. you can feel free to disagree with her, but saying that she's not experienced is absolutely moronic. Also, Susan Collins, if I remember correctly, you voted for Ben Carson, Dr. Ben Carson, to become the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So somehow a surgeon was qualified there, but that's right, Neera Tanden is not experienced enough to be Secretary of the OMB, head the OMB. And also, thanks to Al Franken recently, he pointed out that Senator Collins voted to give a lifetime seat on the Sixth Circuit to a judge by the name of John Bush. And if you're not familiar with John Bush, he very famously was...
I'm going to guess he's not related to Cory Bush.
He's not. No, he was a birther, as it turns out. And he was commonly posting all kinds of things from white nationalist news sources. So that temperament is okay for a lifetime appointment on the Sixth Circuit.
For today's Republican Party, yes.
For today's Republican Party. And to be a doctor running HUD is absolutely fine.
Hey, what he did for HUD in terms of redecorating offices and putting expensive desks in them was unprecedented.
Yeah, I'm sure he spent more money redecorating than he did anything else. And then really let's get down to what this is about. Neera Tanden is a mean tweeter. She sends mean tweets about Republicans. She's been shooting spitwads and shitposting for years.
Oh, not only about Republicans, she has a special hate for the left.
Oh, certainly.
That's even deeper than Republicans. Because at the end of the day, here's the odd part. At the end of the day, it's almost like, hey, Republicans, look a little closer. I think you'll like what you see.
But they can't look past the times that they were insulted by her tweets, which is like, if the tables were turned, Republicans right now would be freaking out about freedom of speech and censorship and the First Amendment and being able to say what you want. And by the way, this is so sad. In confirmation hearings now, we're talking about deleting tweets. This is what we've gotten to. This is Twitter has become such a huge part of governing that we're worried about what people said on Twitter and then whether or not they deleted it before they were going to be confirmed by the Senate. And it's being done by the party who just propped up Donald Trump, the meanest, most
vile tweeter in history.
Tweeter in the history of Twitter, who actually lost his Twitter account. He was so mean on Twitter. But yeah, let's move on. Let's not bring in someone who had said some tough things. It's such a bizarre thing for the Republicans to do too, because they might actually, because it looks like Joe Manchin may not vote for Neera Tanden, and it looks like Bernie Sanders isn't going to vote for Neera Tanden.
I don't know. Bernie could squash this on its own. Bernie has a deciding committee vote, and he hasn't done that.
I know.
And she's had some really mean Bernie tweets.
And Bernie essentially took her off the voting schedule because it said it doesn't look like she has the votes.
Right.
Now, Biden hasn't withdrawn, and they're going to fight for it, and they're working the phones, and they're trying to get her 50 votes because I'm sure Kamala will be 51 to put her across. But Republicans, what are you doing, man? You're picking this fight that you might win. You might block one of Joe Biden's first ever cabinet appointees, and you get yourself a little victory. But what exactly does that achieve?
Well, it appeases me because I think Neera Tanden is an awful person who has awful policy ideas.
I don't mean to go to bat for Neera Tanden. Right. This is just an obscene
Well, let's talk
situation.
about that for a second.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know who Neera Tanden is, she comes right from the Clinton wing of the Democratic neoliberals, and she is a union buster. She was head of Center for American Progress.
Center for American Progress.
Was it rebranded into what, Think Progress or something?
Something like that. And
because it was so awful, they had to rebrand it.
It's essentially just a conduit for corporations and Saudi Arabia to funnel money. She's basically a money launderer for dark, dirty money from corporations in Saudi Arabia.
And you're telling me she doesn't have the experience to run the OMB? Come on.
Right.
She's more than qualified.
Exactly.
She has a resume that's screaming like this is who goes in places like this. Right?
Yeah, I know where to funnel the money. Exactly. And she had that amazing, I was talking about a little bit before we started, that amazing email that came out of the Podesta emails where she was saying, in her think tank, there was an internal email where people were like, well, how are we going to sort of justify what's going on in Syria? And she said, well, look, they've got oil. We can take the oil. I mean, do you guys want to pay for this expedition by cutting First Start and cutting Social Security? Or do you want to take their resources and allow us to sell it? Come on. I mean, what do you want to do? I mean, that's as Republican as you can get.
Yes, no question. And you've got someone who's anti-union, anti-labor, anti-every progressive policy, who did nothing but try to marginalize the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and is a complete plutocrat corporatist. So everything, and a war hawk of the first degree, which that's something that with this flip that we've seen where the Republicans have become the party of the working class now, the Democrats in their everlasting quest to always be, we're not soft on defense, we're not soft on defense, we're not soft on defense,
such pussies,
has become the hawk party. Like, we'll bomb anybody. You show us a place to bomb, we'll bomb it today.
Well, they got so traumatized after 9/11 when there were a few Democrats who said, no, we shouldn't go to war in Iraq. And then they got so much shit from all over the place about how you're soft on defense and
probably
with the
listening
terrorists.
to the Dixie Chicks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the chicks now.
That happened to Joe Biden. We have a president who was all in on that too, who had trouble walking that back when he was debating Bernie. I thought that was one of the greatest moments when he was saying, the president, Bush at the time, misled us about information. It was like, no, we had all the information.
We had all, and you guys, it turned out, had a lot more than the rest of us who knew without having access to all of the people in the intelligence community saying, no, that one was debunked years ago. We ran that one down too. No, we can't sign off on that one. It was very clear, but it was a strategic move of people like that who just stick their fingers in the wind and say, which way is it blowing? And what do I got to say to pick me? The Hillary Clinton model. Pick me. I'll say whatever you want. I'll be whatever you want. Just pick me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's what's so bizarro world about all of this is that the Republicans are working so hard to block Neera Tanden as if it were Bernie Sanders up for a cabinet position, right? Like they're all fighting tooth and nail to get rid of someone who's pretty centrist, who they'd probably like. They'd probably nominate someone just like her if she had been a Republican. And then all of a sudden we have the Justice Democrats going to bat for Neera Tanden.
That's so weird.
What's the move there?
I mean, okay.
Is it a response? So tell me what you think. But my question is it one of these things where their head is going to kind of explode? Because it's like, because Biden's playing this nicely. And I thought I was going to like Jen Psaki going into it because it was like, oh, here's a straight talking person who is, I'm going to just come right out and say it. I've got a thing for redheads. They're kind of my blondes. So it was like, kind of, she's easy to look at. I'm just being honest. I thought she was very attractive, articulate, smart, and all these. I thought, oh, this is going to be a breath of fresh air, until it turned out all she was going to do was answer every question with the diversity portfolio.
Right.
And well, I'd like you to, let's not talk about Janet Yellen's ties to that hedge fund. Let's talk about the fact that we've got a female, right? Let's not talk about Neera Tanden other than she is a woman with brown skin and would be the first Indian, Asian, Pacific, whatever.
South Asian,
a person that's going to sit in this office. And it's like, that's the answer to everything. And are the Justice Democrats looking and going, she sucks, but she's a woman and she's brown and she's a Democrat. And oh my God, I don't know what to do here. My head's going to explode.
And can I say that attitude is typical of colonialism. It's typical, like when, say, Belgium had their run in Africa, specifically in the Congo, and the British did this in India. They would appoint people who had the same look as the local populations as a way to suggest that there's nothing nefarious going on here. Look, we've got a black person who's the secretary of this. We've got an Indian person that's in this position of power. How could they possibly go against the grain of the people who they represent via identity? So that move is a typical. Edward Said wrote about this in Post-Colonial Theory. That's a typical move of colonialist powers, is to use that identitarian card when they're appointing people in positions where these people ideologically are going to vote and rule with the colonists, so to speak, but their identity provides the shield against scrutiny.
And it's playing right into that Republican complaint of identity politics, because they just keep saying over and over as loud as they can, the most diverse cabinet ever.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so I'm going to split hairs here a little bit. So AOC recently elaborated on this support of Neera Tanden by recollecting when Elizabeth Warren went on kind of a great rant and everyone called her angry and, whiny or whatever. And AOC's point is whenever a woman is harsh or mean, they call her a bitch and they call her whiny and, angry. And whenever a man is harsh and to the point, people call that strength. So if all you're doing is looking at the mean tweet argument, I think the Justice Democrats are right in that is somewhat, it's definitely hypocritical and it's somewhat misogynistic. If you're going to look at her and say, well, she was mean to people on Twitter, so she doesn't have the right temperament. And temperament is often a word that is only associated with women in politics. You very rarely, there are crazy men all the time who are on, Ron DeSantis, for example, is
unhinged,
is fiery and defensive and selfish, and he has thin skin in all kinds of interviews, and nobody is ever complaining that Ron DeSantis doesn't have the temperament to be governor, but we will say that about someone who writes mean tweets. So I think they're trying to thread the needle by saying, treat her like you treat a white man, and we shouldn't allow someone to take away a woman of color just because she was sassy to you. But at the same time, they have completely ignored all of her policy at the same time.
And
so
I don't think
there's a good way out of this.
Are doing well at this because they're saying we have to attack her on that because the truth is we don't really mind her policy positions.
Exactly.
So we got to attack her on the other part. And then there's the question, and then the Democrats don't get into the part of, hey, we're not going to defend her because her policies are terrible. So, yeah, that's unfortunate, but you should just look at her policies. It doesn't even have to get to her tweets. That should be the answer. And listen, I'm going to take it one step further and say it's further confusing him because she's also, and to be very honest, she does not fit the mold of what's generally considered to be attractive. So that makes her more of a let's defend this person, whereas, there seems to be more sympathy when someone's in that realm as well. So
maybe not for you. Neera Tanden gets me going. We all have our preferences.
I was thinking, again, I'm a Jen Psaki guy, but it reminded me of the way our friend comedian Corey Allman always has a way of saying it of, she is not a handsome woman. But, listen, be that as may, horrible candidate. I'd love to see her fall. The question then becomes also, was she offered up as someone that the Biden administration had to give to the Clinton faction?
Oh, maybe.
Knowing she wouldn't get through.
They haven't. This would be a good time to pull her nomination. It would be a perfectly...
Then the Clintons might want like a do-over.
They want a failed vote instead? Is that
they
better?
might have to let it run all the way into the ground.
But the funniest part of all of this is that whoever ultimately takes this position at OMB is gonna there are not going to be substantial differences between a Neera Tanden OMB and then person X or Y, whoever Biden puts in the
no.
That's why it's a
policy's going to say
a
the
weird
same.
Fight.
The thing I don't like it seems to be one more middle finger up in the air to progressives of, hey, thanks for coming out. We're glad we got the White House now, but piss off.
Here's Neera Tanden.
Yeah, here's Neera Tanden.
The other thing,
and it's almost like there's this another level to it of like, and look how diverse we are.
You wanted diversity.
What we want is ideological diversity. I don't care how attractive they are, what color they are, what gender they are, how they identify, what they do for a living, if they're rich, poor, whatever. I want to see some different ideas. I don't want everybody to come from the same plutocratic corporatist.
And you can do that and have diverse races and ethnicities in your cabinet as well.
Absolutely.
You can do both of those things. Because
don't use one as a cover for not doing the other.
Right. And this is the other thing that this makes me think about is just how chaotic the next 2 years of a 50-50 Senate are going to be, because literally any Democrat can be a villain if they want to be. Literally one person, in this case it's Joe Manchin and a little bit Bernie Sanders, saying, nope, I don't want that. And if Republicans smell blood in the water and say, oh, look, one Democrat is out, all they have to do is unify their 50 votes and they can sink any Democratic nominee or anything that needs 50
listen,
votes.
Democrats, screw Joe Manchin. Forget about kissing his ass altogether. Treat him as a Republican.
Yeah.
Forget this whole shit. So we get to 50. Let him get primaried.
Yeah.
Let him lose his seat to an actual Republican whose ass you don't have to kick and you can go after or kiss and go after. But this whole idea, because the reality is, what really surprised me was there was a newspaper in West Virginia that showed how he's not representing Democratic interests. These policies that he's against as the moderates, you got to understand, the West Virginia Democrats are different. Horseshit. It turns out they're very progressive. 82% want the $15 minimum wage.
Yeah, and
70-some want Medicare for all.
He's the reason that they might only get $11.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Let the sharks eat him in his own waters. Let him get primaried, and don't have this attitude of, well, if we support a primary candidate, then we might end up with a Republican. Let it be a Republican, and let it be a lesson to the next Democrat that runs of, don't think you're going to come in here with that old Dixiecrat attitude. We don't want a Republican with a D next to their name. It's no use if every single issue has to come down to making it palatable to that jackass from West Virginia.
Which is a good segue to our final topic, most likely, in the stimulus package, because Joe Manchin is the all-star of that as well.
Yes, he doesn't want to go a fiscal hawk because he either doesn't understand economic policies or only sides with the corporatists. Are we going to get stimulus?
I guarantee you he doesn't understand fiscal policy.
This is true. He does not come off as a sharp man.
Yeah, and so he's the one right now torpedoing the $15 an hour minimum wage, which we may get a ruling on, like today. In fact, the Senate, the Senate parliamentarian may say that can go in the reconciliation,
which I absolutely think it can.
Yeah, I think it can too.
Then it becomes a question of, will they fight for it in reconciliation? I don't think the Biden administration will.
I don't either.
No, I don't know. It depends on what Sinema does, and it depends on Manchin. Those are really the only two. And Sinema has said, I don't think, she's not against it. She's for a $15 an hour minimum wage. This is the senator from Arizona. But she has said she doesn't think that this should be something that goes through reconciliation, which is such a bizarre stance, because let the Senate parliamentarian decide that. And if she says it is, then what's your argument going to be then?
That's one of those, just like Susan Collins and Joni Ernst, that's one of those I'm finding it out for myself statements. It's complete bullshit that she's really hung up on the procedural aspect of it. She's trying to give herself, just like actually what it is it's the exact same logic as the whole, well, I'm not saying that inciting an insurrection is right, but I don't think you can impeach someone out of office. It's the same sort of bullshit. Like, I'm with you in the theory, but I'm so reverential of the actual policy and process of the Senate.
And the stimulus, or the recovery package, if you will, the $1.9 trillion package that the Biden administration is pushing, is actually really popular. It's one of the more popular pieces of legislation, certainly more popular than anything the Trump administration ever did in terms of significant policy. Something like 65 to 75% of people on every single poll are in favor of this, including the $15 an hour minimum wage. It's a pretty easy decision for someone who is supposedly on the fence, like Sinema or Manchin are, which begs the question, what are you fighting for then? The centrist Republican votes in your state to keep your seat? I mean, that's the only thing that could drive you at that point, in my mind.
That's a very good point.
And, if Manchin has his way, we get to $11 over 5 years. And I think AOC said it best this week. Absolutely the hell not. 15 is already a compromise. That should be the marching orders.
Because
will Joe Biden go to bat for $15 an hour? Will he start highlighting the community?
And today, too, not 15 in 3 years.
Not
or something
5
like
years
that.
from now.
Yes.
Yeah, will he start highlighting the communities and the workers and the industries where that will make a huge difference? He hasn't really done that yet. He could be making a really strong case for 15 an hour and seems to be saying, well, it's in the package. We'll see.
Yeah, and that's the other part, too. It's not mentioned so much as you have the bully pulpit. You're the president.
Yeah.
And again, if you're Joe Biden, you can go and say, if you think you're going to hold my entire agenda over a barrel, then forget my support. And go out and sink or swim on your own and hope that the Republicans, he'll end up being like, who is that idiot from Georgia, the Democrat that ended up switching to Republican Party and speaking at the convention in 2004.
Oh, yeah, I can't remember.
And remember he came out of the convention and it almost looked like his eyes were red. Like he was just I'm so angry at the Democratic Party. This is no longer the party. You know,
Yeah,
just,
that was good
like,
performance art, actually.
You are unhinged. That's Ron DeSantis level unhinged.
Oh, man.
So won't use the bully pulpit.
Has he used it for anything yet?
Not yet.
In a full, whatever it is, 37
Up
days.
to and including the, hey guys, does anybody remember when the whole idea of having 50 Senate votes were on the line and I went down to Georgia and I promised that if they elected 2 senators from Georgia, which is almost impossible, that $2,000 checks will be in the mail immediately. Hey, we got to fulfill that or else the whole thing might fall apart.
Do you think that it's a mistake that he put the $1,400 checks not as a standalone issue, but instead putting it in this massive stimulus bill? Because
absolutely.
But here's the question: does the recovery package have a better chance of passing with the $1,400 checks in it, given that that is one of the most popular parts of the program?
No. I think what you have to do on that, because look, he already said, I know this is going to drag out till March or April with all the negotiations. Elongating it to that point nullifies what you're going to give, especially if you're walking back your 2,000 to 1,400, which is complete bullshit. That you got in November, December, you got 600, so we're gonna. No, that's what I meant. You could have easily said that. I'm going to give you the 1,400. They didn't. There was a very easy way to communicate that message. I'm sending out the $2,000 checks that weren't, and especially if they're coming half a year later, right?
Meanwhile, Janet Yellen is telling the rest of the world, now is the time to act and act big, while Biden drags his feet in the U.S.
Yeah. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We're not going to spend any of our political capital. We're going to wait for, I don't know what.
We're waiting for the whole entire package to go through, I guess. I guess in April, we'll all get $1,400 checks.
Well, I think that this is an awful start for the Biden administration. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. If they would have done nothing in 2021 but pass a $2,000 check, and listen, put every Republican on the line. This is all. Nothing's going in it. It's standalone. There's no amendments. $2,000 check. You're with the people or you're against the people.
Phased out at $75,000.
Yes.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that so that Republicans can't say, "Oh well, rich
Don't
people."
know a lot of people that shouldn't.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll phase it out, and families need it, and there should be a child credit attached to it.
Absolutely.
Say no to that. I dare you.
Yeah. So if they would have just did that and then marshaled every resource available to the federal government to make sure that we led the world in vaccine rollout, I would literally be pulling anybody from I'd stop patrolling the goddamn border if I had to and pull border patrol agents to start sticking needles in people's arms.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's such a need for a jobs program right now. And the federal government could hire so many people to administrate the vaccine rollout, to do the tracking that's necessary. I mean, you could get so many people to work doing these programs that are necessary. And, let's not forget, we've talked about it before, but the United States is, as far as I know, one of the only developed countries that isn't doing monthly checks and that doesn't have a some sort of Medicare for all system, whether it's single payer, whether it's government run, like the NHS in Britain. But I don't hear that talked about really at all, that the wealthiest country in the world isn't giving monthly checks to people during this pandemic. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous.
From self-preservation. I mean, just the idea of, hey, 70% of our GDP happens to come from consumer purchases. Yeah. And one, a lot of places where they make those purchases aren't even open right now. And two, too many people just don't have any money, or they have a feeling of insecurity of, well, I don't know how long this is going to all take, so I don't know if I'm going to be working in 2 months. Maybe I shouldn't spend money into the economy.
And something like 30 million people right now are behind on rent. It's a catastrophe. Rent is a catastrophe right now.
And Democrats only want to do something like, hey, let's do eviction foreclosure. Well, let's just gum up the problem more and let people have more money, that they're going to build up so that you don't get thrown out now and then figure out how to give your landlord $6,000, a year and a half from now. How about instead, what's your rent? Show us your lease. Here's a check. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's backstop this. And hey, you're going to get 80% of it. And make the landlords take the haircut, whatever the case is. there's so many ways you can do this. And that's what those other countries are doing. They're not doing this moronic, like, we're going to try to inject money into the system through all these other ways. They're giving it to people. They're giving it to people and saying, pay your bills with it, buy your food, take care of your stuff, go to the doctor when you need to, and everything keeps going as normal. Instead, we do this thing where let's bail out the industry when it's on the brink because people aren't doing those things.
Yeah, and also, let's just ignore COVID.
Yeah.
Because if we want to help out restaurant workers, instead of giving them money, let's just open restaurants.
Right.
How's that working out?
Yeah,
Right.
that'd be crazy. And for all these relief packages that have gone through, what is it? The last number I read was about 60% of restaurants that have closed during the last year aren't going to open back up.
Yeah,
So
Jesus.
for all of this money that's been injected into the system, and we've talked about this before, it seems to not be trickling down, quote unquote, to the places that it needs to be to save small businesses, to save restaurants, gyms, hair salons, that huge segment of the sort of small business community. It's just not saving them.
You know how to trickle money into people's pockets? Write them checks.
Right.
Just
weird,
give it
huh?
straight to them.
And give it to the people who need it the most because they spend it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It'll go straight into the economy. We've talked about this, but it's sort of funny that like basically all conversations lead back to this, which is like this glaring weakness of the American recovery is that we're just not giving money to people.
Right. No, we're giving money, but the
Yes,
problem is,
that's true.
As we've talked about before again, the money ends up where, Alex?
Boeing, Carnival, the stock market, in inflating asset prices. That's where it ends up. And, Boeing, they got billions of dollars of bailout money. And one of the stipulations was you can't fire people. They got the bailout money back in April, I want to say, and they fired a huge percentage of their workforce. I mean, it's ridiculous what these companies are doing. They're saying, yeah, we'll take the money, we're not going to fire anybody, and then they just do it. The arrogance
Or
is
we'll
unbelievable.
buy back our stock with other money then. I don't believe they're allowed to use it with that, but then they were saying, well, we have this money, so we're going to take this other bucket of money, we're going to buy back our stock. And people hear about that all the time, stock buybacks, and I don't think most people know what it is. It's just a way to game the price of your stock. So if you take a bunch of your money and you go, we talked a little bit about how like big institutional players can move prices just by buying stuff. Like we talked last week about Tesla putting $1.5 billion into Bitcoin, moves the price of Bitcoin. Same thing happens when a company goes and says, hey, we're going to take a few $1 million of our sitting around money and we're going to buy our own stock with it. And then that activity causes that stock price to go up. And by the way, the CEO's compensation package has a lot of stock options in it. Lucky me.
Isn't that unique? I think it was Apple's one of the biggest parties that's guilty of this. They've spent over $200 billion on buying their own stock back, and it is just market manipulation, but it's legal. It didn't used to be. It was stock buybacks were illegal in the 80s, 90s.
And I thought the CARES Act eliminated that. I thought
They weren't allowed to
temporarily
use that money for it.
Oh,
yes, which they
okay.
did anyway. They
Some of them did, but then the other thing just becomes, well, if you give us money and we have money, then we won't use that money.
Yeah, this is
We
different
use
money.
that money for what we're going to use this money for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pure market manipulation. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. But it's like we talked about last week. Matt Taibbi termed it Richistan, this place where the people in the top 0.01% live, where they go back and forth between the private jets to the 40-story C-suites to the mansion in Palm Springs, the condos in New York City. They live in this place that's completely detached from sort of normal human life, and they live in this world of stock prices and business deals and market manipulations and market share and this world that's completely detached from normal day-to-day life.
And there's this contempt for the people that hey, we got to keep all this going because it keeps the economy going, too big to fail. But personal responsibility. If you can't pay for your dental work, well, that's on you, mate.
Yeah, and I also have to point out that the Republican opposition to the recovery package right now is mind-boggling because they're starting to highlight little tiny line items out of this package, like money for arts organizations and museums, which hits close to home with me. There's racial justice money, and there's lots for vaccine rollout, and they're pointing at this and they're saying, look at everybody, this is just a big liberal wish list. And I think Democrats right now are defending themselves in a really stupid way. They're trying to say, no, that's just a really small part of the package. What they should be saying is, yeah, we won the House, the Senate, and the presidency.
Elections have consequences.
On
We have a
those
mandate.
Issues. Yes. We ran on those issues, and that's why we're giving money to those programs, and that's why you have no choice but to vote for it, which, of course, 100% of House Republicans are not going to do. Not a single one of them is going to vote for this recovery package, which I hope we talked about the response to 9/11 now looking really, really bad to starting wars. I hope that in 10 years we can point out all of the people who voted against this recovery package and say, remember when that recovery package put us all back on track? And look at all the people who voted against it.
Well, there has been no price for it in 2009 to 11.
Not yet.
Mm-hmm.
Well, saying with the bailout for the Great Recession, there was no price in the people that
voted against it.
And Joe Biden was, he was in the White House when 5.2 million people, a lot of them families, got evicted from their homes, and we're staring down the barrel of another mass eviction crisis that's going to happen once the moratoriums run out. And what was their response in 2010, 2011?
Sure, at the banking level.
Yes, give money to the banks, and that will somehow alleviate people's mortgage payments. But what it did was allow private equity firms like Blackstone to become the biggest landlords in the country, the free market solution to an eviction problem.
And also, speaking of no one paying any political price, if you look at the tax bill that the Republicans passed in the Trump administration, which was hugely unpopular, that basically only like 30% of the country liked, no one has really paid for that.
No.
And all these people who have chosen things that have devastating financial consequences are now running against the recovery package and paying no price for this.
And that's where the partisan rhetoric is so effective, because if you even look back to post 9/11, there was a far greater political price all the way through for voting against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan than there was later for voting for them.
Yeah, especially for the Dixie Chicks.
Yes. Remember all those CDs that went into shredders back when CDs were a thing?
Oh, people flipped out.
By the way,
Oh.
it's just the
Toby
chicks
Keith became
now.
like the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't call themselves the Dixie Chicks anymore.
They're the chicks.
Dixie
The chicks.
has negative connotations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and they are abandoning their original fan base, moving all the way to the left.
Isn't chicks a little bit? It's kind of like broads.
I don't know. Maybe it's okay when they say it. Maybe,
I'm sorry.
maybe it's one of those things.
The part about it, I always did like their music. It was that soft, crappy country, but there was something about it that you'd hear it in a mall or a grocery store, and it just made me a little bit warm and fuzzy.
I think Democrats, they seem to be infected by this kind of West Wing mentality of like, well, if we just we just all sit down in a room and we talk, we get our idea, we have the free flow exchange of ideas, and if I can just beat you with facts, then that will change your mind. I think the Obama presidency suffered from this, where they're like, you know what, if we just get Mitch McConnell in the room and I go, well, do you believe in this? Okay. Well, but do you believe in this?
How did that
Well,
work out?
that must mean that you believe that. And then Mitch McConnell would be like, "Oh shit, I just got logic."
Right,
of course,
right.
Instead of
Like the
thinking,
individual mandate. Like, hey, listen, we've got this thing from the Heritage Foundation that you guys rolled out in the 1990s called the individual mandate. Boom, it's in there. Can't vote against it now. They sued them over the individual mandate.
Yes.
The part that they designed, they sued them over. That was the part that they showed the most egregious reaction to. So there is no, there's no intellectualization of any of this.
it's ridiculous. They have this attitude of like, if we can just get people in the room and get our ideas across. It's like, no, you're dealing with the modern Republican Party. They're going to say no to you for
It has
everything.
the
It's
whole
not
thing. And listen,
principled.
it's the same thing when the progressives come in and say it to the neoliberals. The whole thing has the intellectual honesty of professional wrestling.
Yeah. Or, as I would say, Ivy League institutions, the same intellectual honesty that they
Yes.
teach you at Harvard Business School.
There you go. Which Ron DeSantis, by the way, Harvard grad.
Oh, is he?
Oh, heck yeah.
Is that
You
where
can't tell when he talks?
No.
That's one thing that, my son's a senior this year, and he's a great academic, and he's had the opportunity to go to some Ivy League schools for classes in the summer and, really have his pick of where he wants to apply for, to go to undergrad. And he spent one brief period at Harvard and came back and said, oh my God, no, never. I did not want to be there. I never felt like I didn't belong somewhere. And I was so proud of him and happy. I was like, oh, God, that I didn't want to be that dick that had to talk his kid out of going to Harvard. And then everybody's looking at me like I'm crazy. And my family's like, what the hell's wrong with him? But no, it was just, he just said, like, I literally never felt more like I didn't fit someplace. And, I said, listen, first of all, Alex and I have said this before, Harvard is a hedge fund that happens to have a college. The $60 billion endowment that, makes a lot of people money for managing it, moving it, controls a lot of influence. It's very advantageous to roll through there, get chairs and circle back through the revolving door to enterprise the same way that it is in Washington.
Larry Summers.
Yes, and at the end of the day, it is a football league, a sports conference. That's what the Ivy League is. It is not something where we said, all the smart schools have to be in this. No, it's a sports conference for a bunch of old colleges, some of which have good academic reputation, some of which don't, but they're comprised mostly of half of a student body of really smart, hard-working Tiger Mom kids that get in on merit, and the other half are the George Bushes and the Ron DeSantis of the world. About half of it comes through on what they call legacy admissions and donations to building wings of the schools. So it's a bunch of C student idiots and a bunch of smart, diverse kids. And at the end of the day, you don't wear a sticker saying which one you are.
Sounds about white.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, check it out on YouTube. We've got videos from time to time and also at punkrockpolitics.com. Thank you, as always, for joining us. For Alex Boyce and Brendan Ragan, and listen, if you live in Sarasota, get out there and see Safe House. I can't wait to see it myself, and I've heard nothing but good things, and it is a COVID-safe way to get back into theaters.
Hell yeah.
UrbaniteTheater.com, right?
That's right.
You got it.